Hello, and welcome to the Are You a Perfectionist webinar series. My name is Michelle Robichaud, and I'm a professional counselor here at Counseling and Psychological Services with Texas A&M University.
And my name is Warren Wright. I'm also a professional counselor within Texas A&M University's Counseling and Psychological Services.
And we really wanted to create this webinar for students. It's based upon some of the information in our Overcoming Perfectionism workshop series, just to help students identify what are the components of perfectionism, what does even being a perfectionist look like, and how can you begin to overcome that.
So in order to provide a foundation and for this workshop, we wanted to provide a working definition. And so Michelle and I, we define perfectionism as a preoccupation with meeting or exceeding external or internal expectations that as a result causes emotional and psychological distress. So people with perfectionistic tendencies typically struggle, right, to fulfill deadlines if they aren't able to do it, their work or get it done just right, the right way, whatever that may be. They also use negative self-talk and self-defeating statements or messages towards themselves. They also judge other people harshly due to their own expectations of themselves. And they typically minimize their own success or accomplishments when this does occur because there's this innate drive or intense need to look perfect or to be perfect.
So now that we identified what perfectionism looks like, it's time, we wanted to talk about the components of perfectionism. So the first one is sort of this idea of control, which is typically rooted in fear. So fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of not meeting some standard of, standard that we have for ourselves or that we perceive from others. And so we might use perfectionism as a way to control our world and control ourselves. In addition, expectations, we acquire a lot of messages throughout our life through other people. So whether that be through our cultural upbringing, our family of origins, our nationality, our peer groups. And this can impact the way we view ourselves and how we believe we should be. So for instance, when we look at gender, oftentimes women may feel this innate pressure to sort of subscribe to what does it mean to look a certain way as a woman or behave. And if they particularly subscribe to some very rigid beliefs, when they don't feel like they're meeting those expectations, that can cause a lot of shame. Feelings of inadequacy, and so then they might overcompensate and try to be perfect in order to meet those expectations. Now we know this isn't just specific to women or individuals who identify as female. This can also be seen with men and across the LGBTQ community as well as the trans community as well. Self-criticism, will often use self-criticism as a way of motivating ourselves. This belief that if we're hard on ourselves, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps type mentality, that we can somehow overcome this fear of failure and make sure that we're successful. And really, all of these components kind of boil down to this idea of the inner critic. The inner critic is a concept that was developed by Dr. Kristen Neff, who is a leading researcher in the field of self-compassion mindfulness. And she essentially says that our inner critic comes about from these messages that we receive through our childhood or the messages that we perceived through others. And our inner critic uses self-criticism and judgment to try to motivate us as a way to protect us from feeling those feelings of inadequacy, that fear of failure, and feeling as though we are not good enough.
And so now that we've discussed the components and the makeup of perfectionism, we want to shift our focus to how we can move away from that. And so that's why we have this concept of fixed versus growth mindset, right? Our hope is that with the information, the tools and strategies that we provide within this online webinar, that you'll be able to move from a fixed to a growth mindset, right? Creating some psychological flexibility in your thinking. When we think about the fixed mindset, this is typically the belief that intelligence or perfectionism is static or somehow fixed, right? Unable to change, right? And so people may believe in the myth of as soon as I achieve perfectionism, that it will remain stable over time, right? And so they also have the tendency to look smart or to focus on outward accomplishments, right? And we know that that's just not true. Okay, so these individuals that fall under the fixed mindset, they also have the tendency to avoid challenges, get defensive, or give up easily if they feel like a challenge is too much to bear. They see effort as fruitless or as something that is negative. Refuse to receive help or feedback in order to avoid looking weak or as if they're not competent enough. And then they're often threatened by other people's success, right? Engaging in this social comparison that really impacts their self esteem and who they believe they are.
Yeah, and so what we want to move towards is this idea of the growth mindset. So, growth mindset is this idea that our intelligence and who we are as people is dynamic, it's ever changing, and it grows over time. So, individuals who have a growth mindset actually embrace challenges rather than reject them. So they sort of just view learning as this natural part of the human experience. So when they struggle, while that might be frustrating for them, they see it as an opportunity to grow and develop. They don't tend to be outward or focused, I'm sorry, on outward accomplishments. And they really kind of embrace this idea that I can learn from other people and that I don't have to be in competition with them. So rather than comparing themselves to other people, they want to connect with others and want to find out how connecting with them can actually help them to grow and learn over time. And so they also tend, because they're focused on learning and engaging in this process and um, kind of embracing challenges as they come along, they tend not to be so critical of themselves and other people.
So, two ways to begin to practice or to cultivate a growth mindset. You can do thought distancing and you also reframe your thoughts. Okay. And so these are two skills that we talk about and discuss within our workshop, 3-week workshop at CAPS. The first one, thought distancing, this is a concept of creating space between who you are as an individual and the thought that you are experiencing or that you're having, right? And really acknowledging that you are having this thought, and that it's just a thought and that there's no need to change it and there's no need to over identify with it. And reframing thoughts is basically taking a distressing thought and adapting it, um, and understanding how you can go from this negative way of thinking to more of this reframe, whether it be positive or just neutral on what you're experiencing or what you're thinking. Okay, and so with the first skill, thought distancing, step one, if you are able to, please take a sheet of paper and write down an unhelpful thought you frequently experience in the center of that page. And make sure that the thought is slightly distressing and not overwhelming for you. Okay. Step two, just above your thought, write the following sentence: I'm having the thought that. And then step three, at the top of your page, above the last statement, write the following: in this moment, I'm aware that. And your final product, should look something like this. In this moment, I'm aware that I'm having the thought that, with the thought at the bottom. Okay. And so, for example, in this moment, I'm aware that I'm having the thought that I will fail my exam. Okay. Whatever that distressing thought may be. Again, when you are stating that in this moment you are aware of, you are acknowledging that thought, right? And having that thought and just understanding that this is what you're experiencing, that you don't have to over-identify with it, and that it doesn't have to cause distress or control your behaviors or your emotions moving forward. Okay.
And I think that thought distancing technique is really helpful for putting space in between ourselves and the thoughts. But sometimes we know that that's really challenging to do, especially if it's a really distressing thought. So another tool that you can use is reframing thoughts. So here on the left-hand side, we have an original thought that maybe kind of feeds into that perfectionistic mindset or that fixed mindset. And then on the right-hand side, we have ways to reframe those thoughts. So the first one, I am bad at blank. That could be maybe I'm bad at a subject or whatever the situation might be. So if, for example, we say I am bad at math, a reframe for that might be math is not an easy subject for me, but if I try hard, hopefully I can improve my grade, right? Embracing the challenge, trying to move towards that growth mindset. The second one, I must always be perfect in order for a job to be done well. And a reframe for that might be my best is good enough, and I can be happy with the job I've done, even if it isn't perfect. The last one, if I am struggling to do well in my classes, it is because I am not good enough, right? We are saying that this one event that happened is essentially determining our whole self-worth, our whole being as an individual. And so a reframe for that might be, I am human. All humans struggle at some point, and I do not have to be perfect to have value. That I, just being myself, just being my human self, is value enough. And that really comes from this idea of common humanity, which is a concept that Kristen Neff talks about when she talks about self-compassion mindfulness, which is this belief that through connecting through the shared human experience, we can actually offer ourselves compassion, because what we know is that all humans struggle. We've all felt pain, we've all felt loss, but we've also felt joy and excitement. And so by connecting to this broader human experience, we can learn to be compassionate with ourselves. So resources for you to look into in case you want to find more ways of expanding your mindset and moving towards this growth mindset and challenging your perfectionistic thinking. Self-compassion, which is the book by Dr. Kristen Neff. It's an amazing resource. We also have her website listed there as well. There's in addition some other books that we have listed, but we also wanted to highlight A Dose of Motivation, which is written by Warren Wright, who is my co-facilitator of this webinar and a counselor here at CAPS. And in addition, if you want more information on these resources, they will be listed in the link below.
And we also wanted to provide our contact information, again, our address located on campus, and then different social media platforms that you can follow in order to stay up to date with CAPS and what we have going on within our office. And it's also, if you visit caps.tamu.edu, you will find other mental health resources and self-care strategies in which you can utilize to continue engaging in self-care and to challenge your perfectionistic thinking. We thank you for attending this webinar.
Thank you and take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.